In this video, I'm going to give you an important, if not the most important thing to consider while shooting archery. This thing is going to give you a massive advantage while you're shooting in the wind or shooting field archery, and all in all will give you much tighter groups when executed properly. For those of you that are new here, my name is Jake Kaminsky. I'm a two-time Olympic silver medalist in the sport of archery. I'm working to make this channel a really great resource to all types of archery, so if you haven't by now, hit that subscription button and the notification bell, so that way you're notified every time a new video is uploaded. I'm pumping out tons of content lately. Form, tuning, exercises, equipment things, lots of stuff coming out. Also, a bit of background really quick. I've shot professionally for a very long time. I worked under Coach Lee for a long time as well, and I've really learned a lot of important details that get missed on every level of archery, not just beginners but also seasoned veterans that have been around for a very long time. So the goal of this video is to give you the most important step in my mind when shooting recurve archery, and that can apply to barebow, traditional, even compound as well.
You're watching the Jake Kaminsky YouTube channel.
Okay, so this thing I have already covered in my form series, but it's kind of buried down there, and it's also part of another video. It's so important that I decided I really needed to make a standalone video, and I've also been doing a fair bit of coaching locally to me, which, by the way, if you're interested in any sort of digital coaching, like a Skype session, or coming to me locally and getting some hands-on coaching, head to my website, jakekaminsky.com. I'll put a link in the description below, plus I'll put a card up at the top if you want to check that out. But anyway, I've been coaching people a lot locally, and everybody, even people who've been doing this for a very long time, have not exactly done the step that I'm going to give you correctly. There's always just some little differences or a complete non-existent concept of this step or of this thing, and it is extremely, extremely important. So what that is tension and direction. I've already talked about it. You hear me reference it all the time. You may have already seen the video. You may have already heard me talk about it. But even if you have, watching this again can be really important and really beneficial to you as a shooter. Sometimes I forget things. Sometimes I say things differently. And I might say things differently in this video that may click for you now that didn't in the past. So, the theory of tension and direction. What is it? How to apply it? And what will it gain you in benefits? So tension and direction, there's two things. When we're at full draw, we're pulling the bow back. The bow wants to pull us the opposite direction that we are pulling it. So we have tension built up within our body, and then we have to control the direction of that tension as well. Now that's the more important part about it. You know, there's an important concept to realize that the tension that we're building as we're pulling back our bow, whatever we are pulling back, we also have to exert forward via a push. Even though optimally you should be using an angular motion to pull the bow back, not a linear, not a push-pull, but you absolutely have to still push. If you're not pushing, your bow arm will collapse. There has to be an equal balance of forces building up within you. Otherwise, you have hiked up shoulders and you're leaning back, or releases that collapse, or releases where you fall backwards. So there's many different ways to look at tension and direction, but I'm going to give you some really, really important things to consider and how to utilize it for you. Now, like I said, this is even going to work in compound, and I think it is extremely important for that as well. When I focus on it on my compound, my groups tighten up, the bow jumps better, everything feels crisper, and that applies for all types of archery. So the tension that we have tension coming back and around as we're pulling, but we have tension also going forward to resist the bow coming at us. Now, the direction that we are exerting the forces on the bow, or the direction that we are adding that tension in the bow, is extremely, extremely important. Not as much on the backside. The backside is very important, and it should be hinging around and behind you, or if you're a push-pull shooter or a linear shooter, continuous pulling motion. But you have to control your bow arm. The bow arm's tension and direction is almost more important than the back half. You cannot have a good shooter without a good, strong bow arm. You have to have a strong bow arm. This is something that often gets looked over because in Coach Lee's method, it's all about angular motion. It's not push-pull, it's angular. So yes, that's correct, but you still have to have pushing forces going forwards. Even if you ask him, he's going to say, of course, you have to be pushing. But the goal is not to push, like push through the clicker or pull through the clicker. It should be hinging around and adding pressure forward. So the best way to describe where the direction needs to go on the front half is towards the 10 ring. Wherever I'm exerting forces onto the bow via my pressure point, not the pivot point, but the pressure point, I'm pushing this pressure through the grip to the 10 ring, or to where I'm aiming. If I'm aiming off or whatever it may be, I'm pushing it where I want that arrow to go. Now, many people, when I ask them, what direction are you pushing the bow to get through the clicker, or what direction are you resisting the bow? And if you were the target, they would say, that way. And that way is not a descript enough direction. So the best way that I can show you is to kind of illustrate it. So if you're my target and I'm pushing that direction, watch my bow hand reaction as I release. It changes because it's that way. It's not consistent. I really want to take my pressure in my bow hand and push it directly at you, the 10 ring. Want to push it directly at you. So even if you don't do this motion, totally fine. You don't have to do it. But watch, if I'm pushing pressure directly at you, my bow arm stays perfectly still as I release all the way through follow through. It doesn't move. But if I'm just pushing it that way, even if I don't move, it pops. It moves different directions. So the main thing that I always talk about, and I've said it a lot, you shoot the bow shoots the arrow. You do not shoot the arrow. You are exerting forces on the bow, so the bow delivers the arrow consistently. So therefore, if you're not consistently exerting forces on the bow in a consistent manner, how can the bow be pushing the arrow consistently? And then how can you even expect the arrows to land consistently? So a group, right? So if you're not exerting forces on the bow consistently in exactly the same way every single time, no matter the conditions, how can you expect a group? So you have to exert it the exact same way. Don't aim off and still exert forces towards the 10 ring. Where you're aiming off, that's your new 10 ring. Drive that arrow exactly where you want it. If you're shooting field archery, aiming downhill, I'm driving that arrow towards the 6th ring. I'm not pushing towards the horizon. I'm not pushing that direction. I'm driving that arrow in the middle. Now, this isn't to be confused with pushing. So the whole thing that I like to talk about is you are resisting the bow coming at you, meaning you're adding tension on that front half to resist the bow from hitting you, but you're controlling the direction that you're exerting the forces on the bow. You're not actually trying to move the bow forward. It's like you're trying to push and exert forces on an immovable object. So you're not actually moving it in space, but the forces you're exerting on something that you can't move, an immovable object, you're pushing it exactly and deliberately with conviction exactly where you want that arrow to go. Like I said, I've worked with a lot of people, and very, very few, probably none, actually none, nobody has had it exactly the same as I describe. Some people have been very close, but that pressure is coming from a different area. I like to think about it at the end of the chain, because in the set up video, I showed you how to set your bow shoulder, and a quick revision of that is just reaching as far as you can. And if I'm reaching this part of my hand as far as I can towards the target, that's also me adding tension, and then the direction of that tension is more important. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link up at the top, and there'll also be a link in the description below on how to work on setting your bow shoulder a bit better. I'm going to give you a little bit of information on my aha moment when I came in to realize how important tension and direction was. Coach Lee told us about this all the time from day one. Always said tension and direction is extremely important. To focus on the target where you want it to go with your eyes. Use eye focus. Don't worry about the aiming and all the other little details. But some of that stuff gets lost in translation because there is so many other steps within his method. Speaking of other steps, I'll like to remind you guys, just in case you don't have a copy yet, if you don't have Inside the Archer, Total Archery Inside the Archer by Coach Lee and my teammate Tyler Benner when I was at the training center, pick up a copy. It's got every single detail, every single step, a lot of things that I've already covered and some things that I haven't in ways that I don't exactly discuss. But it's a great resource, and if you don't have a copy, get one. There'll be a link in the description below. Disclaimer, that is an Amazon affiliate link, so when you do buy this product from that link or anything else within 24 hours, you help this channel because I get a small percentage of that due to their affiliate program. So when you click on those links, it makes a difference and allows me to make free content for you, so thank you. Now, like I said, my aha moment to this important step is I was at the Rio Olympics in team rounds, semifinal match. I don't remember what end, but I'm aiming at the target, and while I'm aiming, I'm exerting, I'm expanding, doing all the things that I've already talked about in all these videos. But what happened was my sight pin was sitting in the black low, and consciously, I didn't really recognize it. It wasn't really in the forefront of my mind. It wasn't my primary focus. What I was focused on was exerting forces through my bow arm, controlled, and trying to push that arrow towards the 10 ring. So it didn't matter where my sight pin was. I was burning a hole in the target with my eyes. My sight pin was just a little low of my target for whatever reason. And I shot the shot. The shot broke exactly how I wanted it. It was a great shot, but as soon as I released the arrow, my conscious brain realized my sight pin was in the black low. Now, some people may not think that's a big deal, but for me, my sight pin almost never leaves the gold at 70 meters. So you can imagine that normally I wouldn't be shooting with my sight pin in the black low. But for whatever reason, I was still exerting those forces towards the 10 ring, still focusing on where I wanted the arrow to go with my eyes. And it felt like a beautiful shot, but like I said, my conscious brain realized my sight pin was low, and I threw my bow up high, and I believe I said some expletives under my breath. I turned around, came off the line because it was team rounds, and the announcer said 10, and I genuinely laughed out loud, smiling and grinning ear to ear, because I couldn't believe that what my coach had been telling me all these years actually worked. So, but before then, about a year before then, is when I really realized the power of the tension and direction and the control of the bow arm. Super, super, super important. Now, a benefit to that, and a direct benefit, was for me when I had a collapse or a pluck. We all do that from time to time. It happens. I realized that not only was I collapsing on this side, but I was also collapsing on my bow arm side. And once I started keeping my bow arm strong through the shot, which was way easier to do than back here, because for whatever reason, just get the yips every so often, per se. So if I kept my bow arm strong and kept that tension and direction going where I wanted the arrow to go, instead of collapsing and shooting a 7-6 high right, I'd shoot an 8 high right. So that's a huge savings in points. I felt like my scores went up, and I felt like my consistency went up a whole lot when I learned how to control my bow arm. But like I said, it really wasn't an aha moment until it happened at the games, because, I never would shoot with my sight pin in the black low, but I was still driving that arrow in the 10 ring and still had my eyes burning a hole in the target. And ultimately, if you can master that, you're going to see a huge, huge advantage, especially in the wind. When you're aiming off and you can pick your spot and just go for it, it's going to be big. You're going to drift way less. You're going to shoot much higher scores. And ultimately, the wind is not going to affect you like it does your opponents.
Thanks for watching, and thank you to my Patreon supporters. If you want to become a Patreon supporter or check out books, apparel, and some seminar info, head to jkaminski.com, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be notified every time a new video is uploaded. And I appreciate you watching. Thank you again.